This video is sponsored by Blinkist. Go to blinkist.com/theplainbagel to get a week for free plus 25% off a full year subscription. Ladies and gentlemen, scholars and intellectuals, welcome to The Plain Bagel. I'm your host, Richard Coffin, and today we are doing a book review. As you can probably tell by my giant books, I'm a bit of a connoisseur of the fine literary arts, if you will. Excellent pieces like The Solitary Summer, Elizabeth von Arman, The Romany Rye, George Henry Borrow, Charles Dickens, of course, famous author from the 1800s, world-renowned. All historic books that I've never read. This is my wife's decoration. Today I wanted to do a book review. It's a highly demanded topic from a lot of viewers, and I'm actually currently kicked out of my studio. We're doing some renovations, and we need to tear down to access the ceiling in the basement to do some of the reno, so I'm in this office for the foreseeable future, and I thought this would be kind of a fun, unscripted video to do. So today I'm gonna go through my top 5 favorite investing books, giving a quick summary of what they're about, and just telling you kind of what my own takeaways from these pieces were and why I like them so much. And yeah, let's hop into it. In no particular order, I'm gonna go through my top 5 favorite books on investing, starting off with A Random Walk Down Wall Street. This is probably the broadest of the books I'm going to bring up today. It goes over everything from the history of the financial markets to investing philosophy. And kind of the key takeaway from this book, or kind of the main drive of this book, the objective, if you will, is to encourage passive investing, to encourage people to focus on market cap weighted index funds. Now you might think, Richard, why would you recommend a book that advocates for passive investing? You're an active investor yourself. Why would you go against the whole philosophy that you base your entire channel and your career off of? Fair point. but there is a reason. I've always been upfront with my opinion that there's room for both active and passive investing in the markets. And in truth, passive investing is a great approach for a lot of beginners. It's very difficult to go wrong if you take a passive and well-structured approach. And even if you are an active investor who believes you have a superior approach, I think it's kind of foolish to blind yourself to the arguments against your approach. If anything, it just kind of shows you the uphill battle you'll face as an active investor, the things that you rationally should be aware of anyway. So, I think this book does a good job of kind of grounding your expectations because, a lot of the time, especially with the past few years, you have some active stock pickers who, get kind of overconfident in their ability. This book does a good job of highlighting how, over a longer period of time, it's very rare for someone to outperform the market. And it's just an enjoyable read. I think it's pretty beginner friendly, if I recall correctly. I really enjoyed reading it myself, and it's my first recommendation today. The second book is The Education of a Value Investor by Guy Spier. This is a book that was actually given to me by a coworker of mine. And this one is very light on kind of technical details. It's not a book that's going to teach you how to invest, tell you what to look for. But it's kind of a investing philosophy book, which I really enjoyed reading through it. First of all, it's kind of a light read. It's very conversational, and most of it is just him telling stories about himself. For those of you who don't know, Guy Spier is a famous fund manager who's most well known for his friendship with Manish Pabrai and for winning the lunch with Warren Buffett, where you pay a lot of money and bet to eat lunch with Warren Buffett. That's kind of his claim to fame. But also, from my understanding, a very well-regarded fund manager. But I think the thing I really liked about this book is it kind of focused on how to avoid the madness of investing. The emotional influences, all kind of the nonsense. And it does give you some strategies for, researching stocks. One thing that I took to heart with it was the idea of building a checklist every time you analyze a company. Building this cumulative list that you reference every time you analyze a new stock, where you add kind of your personal learnings from your past failures or successes, whatever it be. With the idea being that my checklist is going to be very different from your own checklist, but because we each have our own unique experiences that, we'll draw our own meaning and our own lessons from, it makes it more valuable to have that customized checklist when researching stocks. I don't know if I explained that well enough, but it was a good concept that I took away from this. There's also the takeaway of never investing in something that's being sold to you. The idea that, you won't get a proper objective opinion on a stock if there's someone on the other end who has, an incentive to push it onto you. So, that was a good takeaway. And there's also a bit on here about removing yourself from the madness of Wall Street. Now I live in Canada, so that's easy enough to do. But I still took away quite a bit from this book, and kind of, especially when it comes to separation and the idea of, ignoring the noise and the madness out there, because there's a lot of it. And whether it's on social media, on mainstream media, or Wall Street itself, there's madness everywhere you look. So even though, I don't have to worry about living in New York or whatever, I still took a lot of the lessons to heart. So I recommend this one. Easy read, good kind of philosophical basis for anyone kind of starting off. So yeah, I'd recommend it. And just an enjoyable light read. Next up, we have the obligatory Intelligent Investor. This is one that if you ever watch any YouTube book reviews, this is probably making the list, and for good reason. This is by Benjamin Graham, who's often called the father of value investing, which is the approach that Warren Buffett took. And he's the guy who taught Warren Buffett his investing strategy. So you're kind of learning the value straight from the horse's mouth. Now this book is great because it actually explains value investing and the approach of what to look for in stocks. And while it doesn't focus a whole lot in terms of ratios and stuff, there is a bit of that in there. But it just talks about again, higher principles that you should pay attention to. Things like, companies' solvency when it comes to their debt and things like that. And overall, just teaches the school of value investing, which is basically the approach of buying companies at a good price, as opposed to paying up for growthier stock, which is a very popular approach these days. Now, I will say that this book can be a bit of a challenge to get through, and that there's two kind of caveats to it. The first is that it's kind of old. I think it was written in the 1940s. 1949. So because of that, some of the takeaways are pretty dated, especially one of the biggest ones is around treasury bonds, which this book kind of recommends that you make a sizable portion of your portfolio, you just put it into treasury bonds. These days, treasury bond yields don't even beat inflation. So obviously that doesn't really stand true today. And the other point is that it can be a dry read at times. It's not the most exciting book, but it's one that I think a lot of people view it as kind of the initiation book that you should read with investing. And I'm inclined to agree. I think if you have the patience to go through this book, it bodes well for your patience with investment analysis. And, overall, it still teaches, even with some of the dated lessons and stuff, still teaches solid, fundamentals and principles around what to look for when investing. So yeah, it's another one of my top 5 for today's video. Now, my fourth recommendation is this one. Easy Prey Investors. This is actually a Canadian book that's on the very exciting topic of accounting. No, please don't click away. I need the views. This is a book by Al and Mark Rosen, who I believe are father and son. And they run a Canadian law firm as forensic accountants. Which is probably the most exciting title you could have in front of accountants. But essentially what they do is they investigate fraud based around accounting statements. So when companies misrepresent their financial situation through their accounting statements. And the whole book is, to some degree, these people standing on a soapbox denouncing the Canadian accounting system and saying, pointing out all the flaws about it. So if you only invest in US stocks, this book might not have as many takeaways, but it is still a really interesting read. There are really crazy stories in this book about, how companies have cheated. And it both goes over, the exceptionally bizarre. There's a story, I think, about how a mining company filled barrels or something with copper and then put gold on the top. They put a layer of gold to convince auditors that they had barrels of gold, or whatever it is that you store gold in as a mining company. It's been a while since I read this book, okay? But it goes from stories like that, where it's, blatant scams, to stories of, companies just fudging their numbers a little bit, but staying completely legal under the current accounting laws. So I found it pretty fascinating, but I will say that it is a slow read. It's very technical at times, and you do kind of need a base level understanding of accounting to get through it. But I will say that if you're someone who's hoping to stock pick, you should get to a point where you're able to get through a book like this before you start picking stocks. This is an important area that people need to be informed about if they want to research their own positions. And even if you only invest in US stocks, there are takeaways for all kinds of investors. So I still, recommend it for my more international viewers out there. And yeah, I put this book in my top 5 because I had a lot of practical takeaways from this. And actually, shortly after reading this book, I was researching a company And I found that every year, they were changing definitions of certain terms. And I only found that because this book kind of inspired me to go through the fine print of accounting statements. So it's stuff like that this book kind of drew my attention to, and I had a lot of important takeaways from it. And finally, my fifth book to recommend in today's video is One Up on Wall Street. This book is by Peter Lynch, this handsome fellow right there, who, if you don't know, ran the Magellan Fund, which is actually one of the few mutual funds that is actually on record for beating the index over the long term. It's done what's been labeled impossible by many. And I think it earned somewhere around 30% a year over at least a decade, which was more than double the S&P 500's return over that period. So obviously a lot of people pay attention when this guy speaks or writes a book. But the book itself, kind of more value investor focused. It talks a lot about avoiding, company names that are very popular in the moment and focusing instead on the companies that are quietly making a lot of money, that are quietly being successful without, the headlines about them, because those are the companies that you can often get for a good price that are making a lot of money. The book is also pretty beginner friendly, if I recall correctly. It talks a lot about kind of filtering through companies. So that initial stage of where do you get your ideas, where do you look, and what should you look for in the companies to narrow down your list. So I really enjoyed reading this book. It was actually, I think it was one of the first books that was recommended to me, given to me by my coworker when I started my job as an analyst. So they think highly of it. I think highly of it after going through it. And yeah, highly recommend that book. So those are my top 5 favorite investing books. I hope you enjoyed me going through and summarizing why I like these books so much. And I hope you consider going through them yourselves. If there's a title here that I haven't mentioned, or if there's a title that you yourself found a lot of value in, please do leave a comment and recommend it. I am interested in ever expanding my to-read list, so I will definitely be going through and reading those recommendations. And before I sign off, I do want to quickly thank Blinkist for sponsoring today's video. I don't normally sponsor my unscripted videos, but this one just sat really well. It was a good fit, and I figured you guys might find a lot of interest in this service. Personally, I really enjoy it as someone who has an ever-growing list of books in the investing area, which I do plan to go through, physically to go through the actual books. I really like Blinkist for going through kind of the high-level ones I don't think I'll get to, or, just covering other areas outside of investing. I know it's a scary, path to venture past the world of investing, but I try to do so every now and then. As you probably know by now, I really do enjoy my audio apps. I did read through all these, but it definitely took me a lot longer than I would have liked. And that's why I enjoy using Blinkist so much, is because they're an app that summarizes nonfiction books. And while yes, they cover investing and economics, they also cover a lot of other categories like history and philosophy. The summaries are under 15 minutes, and you can actually find The Intelligent Investor and The Education of a Value Investor on there. If you want summaries of those books, as well as many other great investing books. I've used it a lot to multitask when say I'm doing some home renovation or something. I really enjoy that aspect of it, and it helps me get through the list of books, like I mentioned, even outside of the world of investing that I don't think I'll get to otherwise. But Richard, you might say, aren't some of these classic texts worth going through the whole thing yourself? Excellent point, astute viewer. That's why Blinkist actually has audiobooks, so you can listen to the whole piece on their platform. This is something that's available to everyone, if I'm not mistaken. But if you remember, if you're someone who subscribes to the service, you get a 65% discount on the price of the audiobooks. They also summarize podcasts now, apparently. I don't follow many podcasts, but hey, that might be interesting to you as well. So that's something you can check out. So the first 100 people to click the link in the description below will get 1 week of the service for free, plus 25% off the full membership fee. Thank you, Blinkist, for sponsoring today's video. And yeah, thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, this type of content, let me know, or let me know what other type of content you'd like to see. I am stuck in this room for a little bit. With the studio being shut down at the moment, I'll have to wait and put out some more unscripted videos. So it would be great if you guys gave me ideas of the type of content you want to see. And like I mentioned, please do leave your book recommendations. I do want to go through them. So thank you for joining me, and yeah, read books. They're good and good for you.